I woke up to the sirens, loud and relentless, like they were screaming right into my brain. My first thought was Emily, my daughter. My second thought was how the hell I was going to get to her. The air already felt heavy, and through the cracked blinds, the sky looked wrong. Pale and gray, with a weird glow, like the sun was embarrassed to show its face. Something bad was happening. Real bad. I rolled off the couch, stepping over a pile of tools and an old generator I'd been working on last night. The TV was still on, showing static. I reached for the remote, turned it off, and grabbed my phone. No signal. My heart pounded as I scanned the room. Backpack. Supplies. Knife. My dad always said, never panic, plan. So I planned. Water bottles from the fridge. First aid kit from the cabinet. A flashlight and some batteries from the drawer under the sink. My hands shook as I stuffed it all into the backpack. I paused. The photo on the mantel caught my eye. Emily's gap-toothed smile stared back at me, her tiny arms wrapped around Foxy, that stuffed fox she never let go. I tucked the picture into the front pocket of my bag and muttered, "I'm coming, kiddo." The emergency broadcast blared from the radio as I turned the dial. Something about evacuation zones, hazardous air. I barely caught the words, but the tone was enough. The sirens outside stopped, leaving an eerie silence. My gut twisted. I yanked on my boots and bolted outside. People were running, cars swerved, and a sulfuric smell burned my nose. A man collapsed nearby, gasping, his skin blotched with something black. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. No time for that. I needed to move. The horizon glowed faintly, an orange hue creeping upward like a slow building fire. Military trucks rolled past, soldiers yelling for people to stay inside. But staying put wasn't an option. Emily was across town with Sarah, my ex. We didn't get along much these days, but I knew one thing: if anyone could keep Emily safe, it was me. I took the back alleys, avoiding the chaos on the main streets. My legs ached as I climbed a fence, slicing my arm on the rusty top. Blood trickled down, but I tore a strip from my sleeve to wrap it up. The old gas station ahead looked abandoned. Good. I needed supplies. Inside, shelves were overturned, and most of the food was gone. I grabbed a couple of cans left behind and stuffed them into my pack. As I turned to leave, a man lunged at me from behind the counter. His eyes were wild, desperate. We struggled, and I barely managed to shove him off. He ran out, clutching some snacks like his life depended on them. Maybe it did. The radio I found outside the station crackled with fragmented reports. Chemical exposure. Biohazards. Stay indoors. It wasn't news to me anymore. I tossed the radio and kept moving. The city's edge was a mess. Roads blocked by abandoned cars, people arguing and crying. I found a bike, rusty, but functional, and started pedaling. My legs screamed at me, but I didn't care. Emily was waiting. She had to be. The closer I got to Sarah's neighborhood, the worse it got. Smoke billowed in the distance, and the air was hotter now. A bridge up ahead had collapsed, forcing me to detour through a flooded underpass. The water was cold and reeked of something chemical, but I pushed through, chest deep, holding my pack over my head. By the time I climbed out, I was soaked and shivering. I ducked into a gas station bathroom to catch my breath. Helicopters roared overhead, and through the tiny, dirty window, I saw soldiers moving in formation. They weren't helping anyone. They were rounding people up. I kept moving, avoiding main roads. At one point, I ran into Maria, an old coworker from the garage. She was a mess, crying, shaking, carrying a half-empty bag of supplies. She begged to come with me, saying she had to find her son. I hesitated. I didn't have room for extra baggage, but leaving her felt wrong. So I nodded, and we set off together. Maria slowed me down. She kept tripping, asking questions I didn't have answers to. We argued about food, about direction, about everything. At one point, she broke down completely, clutching a toy she'd found on the road. It reminded her of her son. I told her to pull it together, but my voice cracked, betraying my own fears. She saw it and softened, just for a moment. When we reached the subway entrance, it was caved in. No way through. I cursed under my breath, and Maria gave me a look that said she'd had enough. She left, heading north on her own. I didn't stop her. I found another way, an old sewer line that led under the city. It was dark, damp, and crawling with rats. But these weren't normal rats. Their skin looked wrong, patchy and raw. One lunged at me, and I stomped it flat. My flashlight flickered, then went out completely. I kept going, one hand on the wall, the other clutching my knife. When I emerged, the street was quiet. Too quiet. Then the looters came. 3 of them, armed with makeshift weapons. I fought like hell, swinging my knife, kicking, punching. One of them slashed my leg, but I got away, limping, bleeding, but alive. Sarah's house was partially collapsed when I finally reached it. The front door hung off its hinges, and the living room was unrecognizable. "Emily," I shouted, my voice breaking. No answer. I searched the rubble and found her scarf, pink with little foxes on it. It was torn but unmistakable. Then I heard them. Soldiers. They shouted orders, their boots pounding closer. "Infected." One of them yelled, pointing at me. I raised my hands, trying to explain, but they didn't care. One of them hesitated, though. Recognition flashed in his eyes. Maybe he'd seen me at the garage before. Maybe he just had a heart. Either way, I took the chance and ran. I ducked into an alley, collapsing behind a dumpster. My chest heaved, and tears streamed down my face as I clutched Emily's scarf. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Then I heard it. "Daddy?" A tiny, trembling voice. I looked up and saw her. Emily, alive, hiding with a group of survivors. I pulled her into my arms, sobbing. She smelled like smoke and fear, but she was warm, real. The soldiers were closing in again, but I didn't care. I held her close, ready to face whatever came next. Because for her, I'd survive anything.